and welcome to Science Gallery Dublin online for Culture Night 2020. Part of the focus of our current exhibition, Invisible, was to look at the flaws of the direct provision system in Ireland and to focus on the creators who have flourished and emerged despite the limitations of this system. However, when the gallery doors closed in March, this project came to a halt. So tonight for Culture Night, we've decided to give our audience a taste of these activities. For the second event, we worked with Andrea and Una on a live recording of the United Ireland podcast where they chatted to Melatu Uche Okorie about invisible artists, the creators in direct provision.
"32 counties,
32 questions.
live from Science Gallery Dublin on Culture Night.
Not live, streamed.
My name is Una.
My name is Andrea.
And this is
United Ireland.
Welcome to a very special episode of United Ireland. We are recording for Culture Night, time when galleries, gaffs, cultural spaces, and so on throw open their doors to the public. Like many things, this has been hampered somewhat by a certain global pandemic. But nevertheless, we are at Science Gallery in Dublin.
In real life.
Sitting on a stage.
And delighted to be here. But right now at Science Gallery is an exhibition called Invisible. It explores our fascination with the unknown aspects of the universe, especially on Venus right now. Handy, but what we're exploring at United Ireland are the often invisible or less visible aspects of Irish society.
On this episode, we're looking at an area of Irish society that is hidden by design. We're talking about the ecosystem of direct provision and the invisible to many artists that live in that system and have emerged very successfully from that system in terms of their work. This is about an unseen creativity that exists despite the hardship and obstacles that inhumane system of direct provision has, instigates, that has been embedded in our society for 20 years.
The movement to end direct provision is definitely growing. Frequently those who live within the system are reduced to the system itself, and their individuality, creativity, and aspirations are minimised. Although the direct provision system curtails so many aspects of people's dreams and expressions, there is, of course, art and culture in direct provision. And there are artists and creators of living within the system, and artists and creators who have left the system. On this episode, we're really excited to be talking to one of those creative people, the author Melatu Uche Okorie, author of the book This Hostel Life.
Hiya.
Delighted to have you here.
Melatu's just chilling with us for a while we get through our usual little bits, and then we're going to be having a really fascinating chat, because first it's the state of the nation. Now, usually on the state of the nation, we bring you through the news of the week and our opinions on it, but for this episode, we're going to remind people who may not know a lot about the direct provision system, about the facts of that system. Andrea.
The facts. Direct provision was introduced as a temporary, at the time, emergency measure in 1999. Obviously not very temporary, because it's still going. It's currently run by the Reception and Integration Agency, and many of the centres are run as for-profit entities, which is obviously problematic. The Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission has called the delays faced by asylum applicants as systemic and pernicious. Initially, the system was to accommodate people for no longer than 6 months. This hasn't happened. There are limited cooking facilities in direct provision centres, something our table was set up to highlight, and they are cooking along. You can cook along with our table as part of Culture Night, which is part of the Science Gallery programming as well. It wasn't until 2018 that people who live in direct provision had a right to work, but there was restrictions, and it was only if you're waiting for a decision on your first application for international protection for more than 9 months. Further barriers, like not being able to apply for a driver's licence. Many centres are very remote with no transport links. Not being able to apply for a bank account, and the simple fact of employers not being aware that people in asylum can work. Adults are provided with $38.80 per week, and children are provided with just $29.80 per week. Today, there are over 7,000 people living their lives in direct provision.
Now, obviously, everything is kind of seen at the moment through the lens of the pandemic, and also a new government, which is not exactly covering itself in glory. In the programme for government, for the first real time, there was this intention to end the system of direct provision. This was a key issue for the Green Party, according to them, and it says that the government is, quote, committed to ending the direct provision system and will replace it with a new international protection accommodation policy centred on a not-for-profit approach. However, already we're kind of getting different kind of remarks about how quickly this will actually happen and how it would have to be such a long process, even though government has been pretty great at like doing things very quickly this year out of crisis mode. And is this not a crisis? At the outset of the pandemic, multiple organisations and individuals repeatedly warned about the vulnerabilities of direct provision centres in relation to a pandemic. Masai, the movement of asylum seekers in Ireland, and the Irish Refugee Council repeatedly raised concerns about shared living spaces and no room for distancing. We also began to learn as a society about the crossover between DP centres and meat and pet food factories, as a cluster in one centre was linked to a factory in Kildare, with Masai saying in mid-August that there were 31 cases at a direct provision centre in Newbridge. 3 direct provision centres housed people who were also working at a dog food factory in Kildare. There's also been a cluster of COVID cases at a direct provision centre in Bray and in other places as well. The Human Rights and Equality Commission wrote to Minister for Justice Helen McEntee recently saying people in direct provision are at increased risk due to COVID-19 because they have been placed by the state in a situation which does not empower them as individuals and families to protect themselves in the same way as the general population. The COVID pandemic has highlighted the urgent need for a new approach to how we provide for those seeking asylum in Ireland. Some people in direct provision have been moved to self-isolation centres if they've tested positive. Other hotels, for example, have also been made into temporary direct provision centres across the state. So we know well how risky these settings are and how obvious it was from the get-go that by having people in these congregated settings, they would be made very vulnerable by the state were an outbreak to occur. And that has very unfortunately come to pass. Andrea?
Yeah, it just blows my mind how we're still in this situation. But now we are joined by Melatu, who is a writer and much more from Nigeria, and moved to Ireland in 2006. Yeah. Living for 8.5 years in the direct provision centre, she began to write, earning an MPhil in creative writing from Trinity College, which we are in now, and has had works published in numerous anthologies. In 2009, she won the Metro Éireann Writing Award for her story Gathering Thoughts. Melatu has a strong interest in the rights of asylum seekers and migrant education in Ireland and is currently studying for a PhD in education at Trinity College, Dublin. This Hostel Life is her first book and was nominated for Newcomer Award at the Irish Book Awards.
Amazing. Welcome. Yay. You just can imagine our loud and vibrant audience here applauding.
Nominated. Amazing.
Melatu, can I ask you first, when did you start really writing and what kind of things were coming to the fore for you? Was it autobiographical stuff or broadly more fiction, or what was going on for you creatively?
I think, to answer when I started to write, I think just stories were just coming. It was just, writing comes with situations, I think, and there's some things that would happen and you want to kind of write it down. And I suppose for me, I've always said that it's just characters that I was living with in direct provision at the time. Like I found some women mainly, that I was close to. I just found them hilarious. I found them very huge characters, and living in such close proximity was just, further for creativity for me. I never thought that I would become a writer or any sense, or had that kind of direction in my mind or in my thoughts or in my future. But then just being there, I guess I wanted to, in some ways, put things down. And that was just it. And to say that not everything I write is biographical, I would say. Rarely is anything that I write biographical. I might start off with something close, an incident, and then by the time it's done, it's changed so much that I don't even recognize it. I think most of the things I write are supposed to be biographical, would be maybe come with, I wouldn't call it biographical, I would call it maybe come from a conversation or an event or an instant that happens, and that gives me, kind of like an idea to exploit further, writing.
When you're writing, you obviously need headspace and quiet areas to write in. Was that afforded to you living in direct provision?
I suppose I wasn't asking for, people have written in worse places, to be honest. Yeah, I wasn't asking for much then, so I just wanted to, I remember when I started to write, I had my daughter was very young then, so as soon as she was asleep, I would write. And I shouldn't be talking about, I remember I had my first few years in direct provision, I had a roommate, and she had a child herself, and we were sharing, this, she had her own room, I had my own room, but we shared everything else together. And she would, I liked going to bed early, just as soon as my daughter falls asleep, I'll go to bed. And then she liked staying up to watch television. So it was just two completely opposite individuals sharing a space. And then she would be someone, oh gosh, I'm saying all of this, but she was someone that liked, she would like to do her dishes at her own time, and I'm such a freak that every cup has to be washed as soon as it's done. So you can imagine that kind of living space with two people sharing. So we're just two completely, opposite individuals, but we had to share the space together, share everything together. And I think, some of those things kind of come into play when you're writing. I think some kind of I don't know. Maybe writing comes from maybe frustration helps writing as well. I'm looking for the right word, but there is this thing about, I don't know if people write well in comfort as opposed to when there's something really, really, bothering you. But I think all of those things.
That's so interesting, actually. Because sometimes when your headspace gets squeezed, there can be a compulsion to try and make sense of your stress or life or whatever on the page. Did you find that you were kind of going to the page and being surprised by what was emerging at the end of the day, or did you do it more intentionally?
I don't think it was, because I don't think I ever wrote about, sharing that space with her.
But just generally, yeah.
Generally, I think it was more of, I guess in writing, I was dealing with my own frustrations, because I can be a very, very, I like my things my way, so I guess, having to live where I had to obey all these rules and regulations and not having any way of expressing myself, in other ways, I guess maybe writing came as a means of doing that. I'm not a very easy person to live with, so I guess writing for me was able to, and I probably was a strange, fellow. I'm using the, I suppose I probably was very a strange person to other people that were in direct provision. Like, they would be wondering what's wrong with her. Who does she think she is? And I guess writing was my way of putting all of those frustrations down, or making sense of certain things.
It sometimes feels like your personality is pushed down, because if you like to do things your way and I like to do things my way, and I struggle when living with other people, and I think I'm a dream to live with, obviously, but I know I'm not. But I feel like that fire then of frustration is what drives the creativity to come out, maybe.
It is possibly at the time that could be it. Now it's different. I suppose now I find that I am much more I would like a bit more. Would I say less distractions? Then I was craving the, not that I craved it, but the distractions was giving me the push to write, or giving me the fodder for what I wanted to do, motivation to write. But I suppose now it's different for me. I could do with less distractions and just much more peace and quiet now. Needs change. But in terms of my creativity, I don't know what it was, to be honest with you. I wish I could, I can really, if I had known that I would be here today talking to you, or probably if I had known then that there might be any kind of recognition that would come from my writing, I probably would have taken more time to to think about what I'm doing, to think about why I'm writing and all of those things. But I never thought about them. It was just something that just,
Maybe that's the beauty of it, though.
I don't think so. I should have something very intelligent to tell people when they ask me,
But what kind of writers do you gravitate towards? Like, what kind of stuff do you really enjoy reading? Is there anything thematic or any particular author that is just you know straight away that it's going to be for you?
I do. I love reading Margaret Atwood. I think she does. She writes about life in a way that I enjoy. There's nothing that she writes about that's not. It's kind of deep, and I like Anne Tyler as well. There's just so many writers that that I've discovered that are really great, that write interesting things. I like people who write about women. I'm that kind of. I know. I shouldn't be saying that, but
you should.
Yeah, absolutely say that.
Yeah, I kind of like people who write, they write about women and women's stories. I enjoy that a lot. And but there's so many. But I would say Margaret Atwood would be my go-to person.
Right.
I've never been disappointed reading any of her work. And then I like languages as well. So if there's anything written in a sense that as soon as I open the pages, like I'm in there, I can identify the character. I can say, she's from here, she's Irish, this is Dublin, all of those things from the pages, as long as I'm getting that.
And that came across in your writing with the first story in This Hostel Life, the way the language was used in it.
I suppose, but then I love languages. It's something I like. I enjoy that a lot.
Which centres and accommodation did you live in, and what art or creativity were around you, and did you see coming up during that time?
I was in Mosney, and I don't think there was anything that I would say. We had all these VEC classes and all of that, but I don't think there was per se. There were quite a few things that were done to. Maybe during the summer there will be trips to the zoo and all of that, but I wouldn't say really that it was providing for the artistic development of the people who were living in direct provision. But then some of the staff that knew that I enjoy writing or that I like reading, or even there would be people who come in intentionally to make friends with people in direct provision, to kind of take you to. That are just so welcoming that, I made a lot of friends while I was in direct provision. A lot of them are still my friends today. They are the people that I would actually count as my friends, so those would be the ones that would tell me, like, oh, there's a writers group in Drogheda, there's this going on, why don't you attend this and things like that. So it was just from, people, one or two staff that were working there, and then people that were coming in that I made friends with who were coming to Mosney to kind of visit, people who were living in direct provision and help them to, what I say, the right would be assimilate more into the wider society. That would be the ones who made me aware of what's there, in terms of arts and the art sector within Ireland. And Ireland has a lot. Like, there's so much, I discovered, I love reading, but it intensified living here. It's just the whole world is just, or the whole country is tailored towards encouraging artists and arts development, which is fantastic, because that wasn't the case in Nigeria.
Talk to me about the journey the book went on, like who you published with, and then what happened once it became an actual object.
Right. Okay. I met Grania, who is one of the publishers of. She's part of Skin Press, and I met her while I was living. She was, one of the people I met when I was in direct provision, and we became friends. And we would share stories with each other. I'll email her my story. She'll email me. We'll just kind of comment on each other's stories, meet up for coffees. Yeah. And then I think it was 2017, she had always been mentioning to me that I would like to set up something, for, stories. I feel that migrant stories should be out there, it's just something that every time we sit down, we kind of talk about it. And then she comes to me around 2007, she said, oh, I met this lady, we do school runs together. And, we're just thinking about, I told her about this idea that I have, and she's interested. And she has worked in publishing a little bit. I think Finola worked with Irish books, publishing kind of Irish books, but she had that kind of, she had a little bit of idea around the publishing world. And both of them teamed up. And I'm thinking, okay, that's nice. This is interesting. And then she says, I would like to publish your book, and I would like to publish your stories. And we talked about I gave her some stories, and back and forth, and we decided on it was supposed to be a bigger volume, but I just didn't have the time to work on the other stories that she wanted to have. The 3 that she took were just the ones that were ready at the time, and she said, okay, we'll just go ahead with these 3. And I thought, okay, that's fine. And and there you go, there's Skin Press, and the book was done. And I was just, every time I see her, I'm always in awe of her, because I'm thinking, I knew when this started. I knew when this was just an idea, sitting around, a coffee table and just talking. I say, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, that would be fantastic. And then there you are, and they have those, and they have Skin Press, and the book was out. I remember it was the Dublin Book Festival, 2018, that it was launched. And I think that was the first time I held the book in my hand as well, because it just came out, and I'll see afterwards the interview, but it was just brilliant to have that thing and to know that it's coming from someone that's known me for a very long time. And I feel blessed in that sense, just because I feel secure with them. I know that I'm with good people, and it was just now. The more I mature, the more I know more about arts and how, publishing works and all of that, the more I'm thankful that I started with them. I started with people that I know, and I started with someone that, I trust, all of those things up to this point.
How did it feel holding the book in your hand for the first time?
I suppose seeing my book was interesting, but, it was just numb, I would say. Yeah, but it was interesting. You want to do more. I guess for me, I was more annoyed that I only submitted 3 books after I saw it in book form. I'm like, why did I submit only 3 stories? I should have done more than this. This is bad. But, yeah.
Well, that's a good, obviously you have, writers beat themselves up so much all the time about not reaching these bars that we haven't even thought of yet, until you're like, oh, I should have done more,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I identify with that. What did you learn about yourself during the process?
That I don't like being center of attention. I think that's the one I've done most. I could do without. If I had known, earlier on, I probably would have written with a pseudonym or something like that, and probably had somebody represent me as Melatu and stayed in the background, and every time they called Melatu, the person would step up on stage, or, I envy those who publish without, letting anyone know who they are, just kind of, did their own thing. I wish I could go back to that now.
Why do you think that is? Why do you feel like that?
I don't know. I'm quite. I just feel that there's just this. Sometimes I feel talked out. I've said everything that's left inside of me to say.
Which is why it's so great to do podcasts all the time, right?
Thanks for coming.
I feel that there's just not so much. I kind of like my own. It's hard because you feel that it's just you, but that's how you feel. You feel that your sense of anonymity is gone. You can't just be anywhere without somebody, when someone looks at you, you think, oh, they know that I'm Melatu who wrote those stories about that. All of those things kind of go. They probably don't. They might just be looking at you as just this normal, why is she standing behind me like that, But then you're thinking all of these other thoughts, So, yeah.
I was reading a thing the other day about when you write something and then you have to talk about why you wrote it. And you're like, I've done the work, I've put out what I want to say, read the book, and then you'll know why I wrote it and what I want to say, because it's all in there.
Yeah.
It's not how it works. Sell the garment. You got to sell it.
Well, that feels like shit. But tell me this. This Hostel Life was turned into an opera. That's so bananas amazing. How did that happen, and how did it feel, and how?
That's another amazing thing, which is interesting because it's just, an opera. It wouldn't even be an art form that I'm familiar with, in the first instance. I can think play, I can think, any other thing, but opera is just kind of like a stretch. But one of the girls, there's a girl that I met. I don't know if I should mention her name, and she read. We're friends, and she recommended This Hostel Life to someone in Irish
National Opera.
Irish National Opera, and they read it. I suppose they were looking for something outside of the usual to work with, and they contacted me, and that was how it went. And it was amazing, though. It's just great.
How does it feel when somebody else has a certain amount of interpretation or ownership over something that you've worked a lot on?
With This Hostel Life, because it's such a small book, so they wanted some text out of it. They showed me the text that they wanted, and another thing they wanted to do was to transcribe it in such a way that it's in standard English, so the singers would be able to sing it, and but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't bad at all because they didn't go far from what is originally there. They just sang what is there. So it wasn't. It's nice seeing it in another form. It's strange, but then in a way it's still kind of like, this is interesting. You mean I have to get to this? There's something. I contributed to this, getting to this point, or to this happening in any shape or form. So that was interesting in some way.
How do you think, or what do you think obviously the priority, I think, for us as a society should be to dismantle direct provision and have a much more humane, holistic, fair, liberated, decent housing system whereby people can reside and have their own autonomy and do whatever they want and have their independence while they're waiting, hopefully, a short period of time until whatever happens next, their asylum is approved, for example. But that does not exist right now, and we should all be fighting in society to make that happen. In the system that we have, what advice would you give to the people who are running it or who are managing it to allow for enabling people who are creative, who are artistic, who are artists within the system to be able to create, to be able to express themselves?
You see, with direct provision, there's it's like, I remember once, in an audience like this, somebody asked me, how could direct provision be made better? And I thought, there's no way you can make it better.
Yeah.
It's not because it's not because people are being treated. It's none of those things. People are being treated, in a bad way, or no. It's not any of those kind of stuff. But it's just that. I mean, just think about it. Would you want to be living in direct provision? Would anyone want to be living in direct provision?
No.
And the answer is no. So it's like saying someone, if you're in an institution, let's try and make it better. The truth of the matter is you can't make it better. There's nothing that you can put in there that's going to make it better. The only thing is just finding another alternative to, housing people in a place where they feel independent. I don't know if there's for me, I was writing. I wasn't looking at myself as an artist or a writer when I was in direct provision. But if that would change, if that could have changed, probably, and I'm one of the people who are, because there's so many people who have emerged that are writers and artists of all kinds of art forms that are in direct provision. And I don't know how they, I suppose you still feel that sense. There's just that thing about it that makes you feel inferior to everybody else. And I don't think that that's fair to anyone at all. It doesn't matter what it is that is done to make you feel better. You just want to be like every other person. You just want to be normal like every other person. You just want to take your chances in like every other person. It's not because life is better for any other person, but you just want to feel like, I'm making my choices in life. I'm like you, I'm like that person, I'm like, I'm having a bad day just because it's a bad day. I met this person just because, so it's not because you're dependent on something like this. It's almost like an adult coming to, an adult going back to live in a boarding house. That's how it feels. I can't describe it any other way. It's like having to live under rules and regulations of somebody else. And there's nothing you can do to make that feeling to go away, And
Thank you for that. I think so. It's like the way to enable people is dismantle the system. That's it.
For me, that's just
fundamentally, yeah.
That's just the way. I don't know any other. And I'm I know that so many people would take umbrage at that and, what is she talking about? You can't accommodate everybody. And I understand that, and I do understand that. But then I can't sit here and say, make it better for somebody else, because at the time I was living there, I didn't want them to make it better for me. I just wanted to get out.
Yeah.
So I can't, in all honesty, or in my conscience, sit and say, oh, if you add this and this, if you make the kitchen wider, if you, put an art center somewhere in the middle so we can go out in the morning and do, that will make me, because that never made me happy. It probably would, I'll probably go there a day or two, and then I'm, and I'm feeling like, I'm back to feeling horrible, or back to feeling whatever way I was feeling before. So it wouldn't have made it better. It wouldn't have made life better for me at that time. So I don't think that would be the answer for me.
Yeah, I think you're totally right.
What has life been like as an artist from Africa living in Ireland since?
Well, I think with the fact that it's different, analyzing that there's so many elements to me as an or would I say, what was the question? A writer or an artist?
All of them.
All of the above.
Okay, I think it's different. There's so many layers for me. I look at it from the lens of so many things. I look at it from the lens that I've been in direct provision. I look at it from the lens that I was in direct provision. I look at it from the lens that I'm a woman. I look at it from the lens that I'm an African woman. I look at it. So there's so many layers to it. So if one is stripped away, so there's just these other things that are still there, And one of the things that it's been interesting, and it's been, it has its struggles though. It has its challenges as well. There's just so many things that, and I just wish that there's somebody I can ask and say, how do you deal with this? How do you do that? How do you do that? But then I look around and there's no one like me that I can ask these questions. So I think it's just about one. You're trying to navigate your way through things, and sometimes you overthink things. Sometimes it's just what it is. But
What are those questions or challenges? Like maybe we can help.
I know. So many of them, sometimes it's just about how. Even just response to stories and, things you want to talk about. And sometimes you think, oh, am I overdoing this, this I'm an African thing, there's just little things like that. Even at first, like not at first, like I'm still there now in terms of, I think that sometimes because I was in direct provision, people tend to almost like, if there's anything that's been done that has to do with direct provision, it's like, okay, talk to Melatu, And I'm thinking,
I'm more than that.
Yeah, I'm more than that. This is almost like pigeonholing the person. And then it's hard to, because they've put you in that space, it's hard to get out of there. You're struggling to kind of, and it's not a bad, it's not like it's about, but I want to do other things as well. I don't want to be, and more importantly, I think that there are more people who are better suited than me, who are writing in direct provision right now that needs to be spoken to. Their experiences are fresh. Mine is over 6 years old, so that's one of the things.
Still a lived experience, that way.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for chatting to us. Everybody should buy your book.
Okay.
This Hostel Life. And we really appreciate the time that you've taken out.
Thank you.
In this crowd-filled room that we are sitting in right now in your alma mater, Trinity College. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. you so much.
So before we wind up the podcast, we're going to do a quick fire round on calling out the people who profit from the for-profit system of direct provision, which is cruel and inhumane and needs to be dismantled.
Can I say I'm not here? Am I allowed to say that out loud?
Yeah, Melatu's not here anymore.
Yeah. She's gone now.
So there are, of the 38 centres in the country, only 7 are state-owned and 3 were purpose-built. The government has claimed that details of the €1 billion spent on private firms are commercially sensitive, but some public information shows that a number of the companies involved have made more than €100 million each from housing asylum seekers. Many direct provision operators are run by offshore holdings, meaning the details of its profits from direct provision do not have to be published. Do you want to call some out there, Andrea?
Sure. Since 2011, Mosney's been owned by an offshore firm, Soning Unlimited, which is registered in the Isle of Man. However, since 2002, the centre has received 136 million. Alan Hyde's Barlow Group received fees of 7.5 million for accommodating asylum seekers in Cork and Waterford. Mill Street Equestrian Services received payments of 6.53 million. Mill Street is owned by the Duggan family, and since 2000 the company has received a total of 82.5 million in fees from the state. Mill Street is unlimited and owned by Isle of Man based firms Arabella Unlimited and Tolosa Limited. And last year Aramark was paid almost 6 million for operating 3 state-owned centres in Knockalasheen, County Clare, Kinsale, County Cork and Athlone, County Westmeath, where in total more than 825 asylum seekers were accommodated. And in response to Aramark, University of Limerick said the university, because they provide catering on campus, they said the university has serious concerns about the government's plan for asylum seekers, especially with how they are housed, and believes that they should be afforded the opportunity to work and receive state social services like the rest of the population. And that was after bread and milk was denied to a sick child in an Aramark centre.
So these are the things, the facts and the figures that are often made invisible by design, certainly by various forces in Irish society, by the Irish government that has consistently refused to face up to a system that has been widely criticised by multiple human rights organisations and indeed by the Irish public themselves. The design of the system that attempts to block access, communication, dialogue, connections between people in Ireland and people living within the system. The idea often spouted by Leo Varadkar that this is somehow optional and people can walk out if they want. And the general ignorance and lack of movement by the Irish government on a system that is ultimately racist, cruel and inhumane. These things are handy to be kept invisible because it means people don't do anything, but it is 2020 and it is high time for this system to be fundamentally dismantled and something actually humane that gives people their independence, autonomy and freedom is allowed. And it's what we need to do as a nation, and nothing short of that is acceptable, I feel. On a positive slant, I know that was a massive big rant and it can be very difficult to hear, so apologies for that in many ways too. Direct provision centres and DEIS schools across Ireland are receiving this week a gift package of new books by leading Irish authors. The gift comes as a part of an Arts Council initiative to ensure that as many people as possible, no matter where they are, can experience Culture Night this Friday and September 18th. Until then, check out Masai, you can donate to them. Look up wherever or begin your own NDP movement in your own community amongst your own group of friends. Keep the pressure on our government. Mail your TDs. Talk about this with your friends and raise awareness, be that putting a sticker on your car or in your house, just generally chatting to people. A lot of people still don't know the actual facts of this system. We need to do much better, and as we always kind of say, there is no decent or reasonable equality unless everybody on this island is equal. I have been Una.
I've been Andrea.
That was the sometimes invisible but very amazing creativity that can emerge from the direct provision system, which needs to be dismantled, and we are United Ireland.
And don't forget to buy Melatu's book, This Hostel Life.
Well done,
Peace.
ladies. That was
Great.
great. Ooh.